Markus Ziener is a senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. He's joining us from Berlin. Very good to have you with us, sir, on Al Jazeera. The foreign minister of Ukraine isn't expecting any major breakthroughs, but how significant is it that this meeting is going to be taking place between two such senior figures at this point in the crisis?
Well, it's definitely significant, and I think it's going to pave the way for a meeting eventually between Vladimir Putin and Mr. Zelensky. The question remains to what extent are both sides able to move towards each other, and whether they can reconcile a couple of those things they have been discussing lately.
We are seeing the talks going on, the diplomacy going on in Europe that we've been covering just earlier in the program, and also the US involvement in that. How do you analyze the way that the countries are moving, the geopolitical situation, if you like, as a result of the conflict?
Well, I mean, you have to see in what situation each country currently is. I mean, the Russian advances are not going as well as they probably have thought they would. And Ukraine is defending in a much more serious way than anybody has expected, in particular in Europe. So to a certain degree, the positions of both countries have changed. I think the Ukrainian situation has improved to some extent, while the Russians are seeing the extent to what the West is able to do in terms of sanctions and in terms of really damaging the Russian economy. I think that has changed to a certain degree the way they are negotiating. On the other hand, I mean, this is a war of attrition, and I think we haven't really seen the full scope, the full scale of what Russian military is capable of doing. So I wouldn't be too over-optimistic in terms of how long Ukraine can hold that off.
One of our guests earlier in the program was suggesting that there was the possibility of a treaty of neutrality for Ukraine if the NATO membership wasn't an option, as it clearly now seems not to be for Ukraine. Do you think that there is some diplomatic way of getting towards a treaty of neutrality that might lead to an end in this crisis?
Yes, there is a movement on this end. I think Mr. Zelensky made clear that he is willing to talk about that. That's new. I mean, he was made clear that he wants to become a member of NATO. That's even put down in the constitution of Ukraine, that this is the kind of the final goal, to become a member of NATO. On the other hand, I think he realized that this is not something that's feasible in the near future, not even in the situation they're in currently. So there's a disappointment on the part of the Ukrainians, and he's more willing to give in to this demand. But I think we should be cautious here and not mistake that for kind of a concession by the Ukrainians that's really coming a long way to what the Russians are demanding, because when it comes to acknowledging the separatist areas in Donetsk and Lugansk, I think that's not something the Ukrainians will accept. So there's a little bit of movement. I'm not sure whether this is really enough for the Russians to accept.
I want to ask you about the role of Germany in all this. As we might remember, about 2 or 3 weeks ago when the crisis began, Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz was being criticized for not doing enough, not moving quickly enough or decisively enough. That situation seems to have changed. What's your assessment of Germany's position with regard to all of this?
Yeah, what happened 10 days ago when we had this extra session of the parliament in the Bundestag, and this was a sea change. I mean, there is no way actually in overestimating what happened then. I mean, Germany always being cautious on the end of, well, taking part in wars and trying to stay out of it. They changed course. They realized that they have to do something in terms of improving their defense and in sending weapons to Ukraine. That was a no-go for so many years. Germans always wanted to stay out and rather give money instead of being involved in any way militarily. Now this has changed. Now, when it comes, for instance, to what was earlier in your program about those fighter jets through Ramstein to the airbase of the Americans and then sent to Ukraine, Germany doesn't really want to be involved on that. So there's a fine line. They are ready to go to a certain degree and change course. but they are very very cautious not to overstep that and to escalate the whole conflict.
Really good to get your thoughts on this, Markus Ziener. We appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.